Welcome to the Forward Together webinar series, brought to you by the School of Management at California Lutheran University. The series is designed to bring interesting topics and people to our global community of students, alumni, and leaders in business and government to empower, educate, and inspire. Forward Together features experts from industry with the purpose to spark thought, connect people, and stimulate engaging discussions. Please submit your questions in the chat. We will hold a Q&A immediately following the presentation. Today's host is Gerhard Apfenthaler, Dean of the School of Management.
A very good afternoon to everybody from here at Cal Lutheran University in Southern California. I'm always excited about our guests at this webinar, but today I'm particularly excited about our guest, Kelly Kimball, who is a technology entrepreneur and a political strategist, and really a pioneer also in e-government in the United States. He has founded a number of companies, taking them from startups to multi-million-dollar corporations. And among others, he created the country's first electronic filing system for political reporting across multiple states. Currently, he serves as the executive chairman in his latest venture called Vitu, which is highly successful in the space between government, technology, and business. And he has not only grown this company impressively, but he is also, of course, like many of us, dealt with the recent challenges. So I'm looking forward to this presentation titled Managing the Unimaginable: Crisis as an Opportunity. Kelly, welcome, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Thanks, Gerhard. I appreciate it. And thanks, everybody, for showing up for this. Let me tell you what we do first. Vitu is basically a public-private partnership. We have a contract with the state of California that allows us to fulfill the duties of the Department of Motor Vehicles on behalf of the government, on behalf of the Department of Motor Vehicles. What we do basically is, let me go back. What used to happen before we were in this business is when you go buy a car, they tear off the bottom of one sheet of paper and they stick it in your window, and that becomes your temporary registration. And then the clerks for each of the dealerships would bundle up all of the cars that were sold and all of the government documents, and they would walk in and they'd stand in line at the DMV, and then 3 months later, 4 months later, you get your license plate. The program that we're involved in turned that around, which now requires every dealership in the state of California to use an electronic filing system from one of the vendors out there. We currently, in California, we currently register and title about 72% of all the new vehicles in the state of California. We've been in business now for we launched our first product about 13 years ago, and we've been in this business ever since. How this came about is Don Armstrong is my business partner. I've been incredibly fortunate to have a partner like Don, who I consider probably one of the most innovative and visionary CEOs of our generation. Don came to me with this concept, and it was a concept that was not used very much, but there were some pretty significant competitors in this marketplace. The competitors that we deal with are multi-billion-dollar companies. We are the little guy in this business. And yet we have somehow figured out a way to dominate in each of the states that we've gone into. For example, California, 72% of the market. The state of Oregon, we've got 100% of the market, and we're expanding across the United States. And how did we do this? Well, I think it's important to understand that we had a very unique kind of look at the competition and our competitive landscape and the competitive marketplace and our strategies to compete. When we first started this business, we looked at those giants that are in the business and we thought, how do we compete with them? And we knew we could come up with a better product, and we knew we could come up with a better solution, software and service solution. But they're big. They've got a lot of might, they've got a lot of muscle, and they've got a lot of influence in the market. One of them had about 90% of the market share when we first came in. And Don, to his credit, decided that we shouldn't compete directly with them. That would be suicide. What we do is we change the game. And this is an important part of who we are as a business, that we started looking at the business itself as a game. We started looking at it as, how do we get our competition to move off of their playing field and onto our playing field, which is the only way we could be successful in this business. And with that, we developed 5 stages of competitive response. We call it the 5 stages of competitive response in a disruptive business environment, and that would take another 2 or 3 hours of seminar to actually describe what that is. But in essence, it was an ability for us to take a look at everything they were doing, everything they were saying, every single thing every move they made, and we would analyze that and decide, are we disruptive or are we not? Are they going through those stages of disruption? Are we managing to move them in our direction? Because after all, when you talk about being a disruptive business, you're really talking about things they do. It's not something you do. You're not disrupting yourself generally. You're trying to get them to move. And we've been trying to get them to move to our playing field. And so that what that meant is that we had to really take a strong look and a constant look at who those competitors are and how they respond. And what are the basic characteristics? And what we came up with, for the sake of this very, very short discussion here today, is we divided the market into 2 types of management styles, if you wish. There's the founders and the entrepreneurs. That's who we are. And then there's the institutional managers. Those are generally publicly traded companies. They're people who have a whole lot of bureaucracy that they've got to go through to make decisions. And they are a vastly different company. We both want the same things. We both want to be profitable. We both want to be successful. But we have a whole different look at the market. We have a whole different look at how we act than those companies do. I call those folks, that for the sake of this discussion, the bankers. The founders and entrepreneurs, if you take a look at who we are as a company, one of the things that we did as a company is we came up with a slogan early on, that we work for the applause, not the money. And the longer sustained the applause, the more the money rolls in, that money is a byproduct of the excellence you provide. And what that is an example that we're mission focused. Our competitors, these large publicly traded companies, these people are into capital preservation. They're market focused. Their main concern is that preservation of that capital. We are a rapid decision-making team. We're like a little speedboat. Our competitors are like big battleships. They have so many layers of bureaucracy that they've got to go through, especially if they're asking for investment into their companies, that it's very difficult for them to actually keep up with us. And what that does is that provides us an ability to innovate ahead of them. And then if they decide that what we have done is hurting their margins and hurting their their ability to compete, then they'll start moving their battleship toward us. And then we know we've been disruptive. We're able to make more long-term strategic decisions. Don and I can talk about doing something, and we can make a decision today. We can invest whatever we need to invest today, and off we go. Our competitors don't have that luxury. They've got to take time. They've got to do an analysis. They've got to do return on investment analysis. We don't have that. We don't have that restriction. We are, in the entrepreneur world, we're more risk takers. In the bankers world, they're more risk averse. We're able to take more chances than they're able to take. And most importantly, in our world, culture is embedded in our DNA. The people that got us here, our employees, mean everything to us. They are the reason for our existence. They're the reason that we're successful. And and generating this kind of startup family type culture is really important to the way we compete out in the street, because if we didn't have a strong culture, our competitors or our customers would feel that, and they wouldn't be so apt to stick with us. Culture in the banker setting is more of a luxury. In many cases, it's sort of an astroturf concept. It's something you do if you have enough money to sort of invest in it, but it's not part of the DNA. Right, so that's, with that sort of background, the competitive background, that's how we came up with this, why we're doing what we're doing in this really horrible, the pandemic. So let me share this screen with you. This is the vehicle transactions. These are the companies. This is our clients from 2007 and our growth through that period of time. We've gone from being nothing to doing about 250,000 transactions per month in 2020. And what's interesting about this is that prior to the pandemic, you're looking at this chart and you're seeing seasonal ups and downs, and but we are have constantly been on sort of this hyper growth. And it lulls you into a sense of confidence that you believe that this thing is gonna happen forever, right? And all of a sudden, let me get to that screen again. We experienced this, the unimaginable. There is no model that we looked at prior to this pandemic that showed this kind of downturn. If you would have asked us prior to this, if shown me this chart and said, what is it that's going to happen to make this thing happen? There is no way I could even come up with any sort of concept. A nuclear war, maybe? What would cause you to lose over half of your transactions? We're a SaaS business. We're a transaction-based business. So we were dramatically affected by this. And by the way, this screen, this chart is not unique to us. This is the chart of probably every transaction-based business there is in this country, if not the world, at this time. This is the unimaginable. And if I ask you to explain to me what the unimaginable was, I would bet close to 100% of you would say, well, it's the pandemic. But I would argue that it's not the pandemic. What we didn't imagine was the government response to the pandemic. The response was to shut down the dealerships. And a good example of this is if I go back and I look at the negotiation we had with our private equity companies, with the negotiation we had with our early stage investors, and with the negotiations we have with our banks, they go through a significant amount. Those of you who've been through this know the deep due diligence that these entities go through. They asked us, for example, what would happen if the governor with a swipe of a pen decided to eliminate what you do for a living? And that where that is a possibility, it's impractical. And we go through the explanation of why they can't do that, why they wouldn't do that. And it's accepted. And we move on and we're successful in our negotiation. What was never asked, because of how ridiculous it would have sounded, was what would happen if every single state that you were doing business with, the governor in every single state made it illegal to sell cars. Well, of course he wouldn't ask that question. It is a stupid question. And yet here we are. And this is what happened. The governor of the state of California, the governor of Illinois, the governor of Virginia, of Oregon, of Indiana, every state that we were in said, you got to close your dealerships. That was the unimaginable, was the government response to this. And when that happens, we were taken completely by surprise. And when you look at this chart, you see this death drop. But what you should know about this is it looks on the chart like it happened almost immediately, but the reality is that's a 2-month death drop. Imagine falling day after day, week after week in that steep of a decline and not knowing where the end is. And this is the stage that we call survival. We were in survival mode. And I described earlier the two different types of companies where we have bankers who are in capital preservation mode, and there's us who are investors. Well, let me tell you, when this kind of thing happens, we are all bankers. We're all in capital preservation mode. We are trying to survive. We're trying to eliminate any costs that we don't need. We're trying to get by with a bare minimum. And we're doing this without knowing if we're going to crash down to the rocks. We don't know where the end of this was going to be while we were doing this 2-month fall. But even though on the inside we're screaming, on the outside as leaders, we've got to be confident. We've got to show confidence. And part of that is showing that we understand where we are. We understand that we're in survival mode, but we are planning for our future. Our employees expect that. Our market expects that. Our client expects that. So what is that strategy when you're in survival mode? Well, first of all, everybody's circling the wagons. Our competitors are circling the wagons. We're circling the wagons. But the very first thing you've got to remember to do is that this leaves your territory open for poaching if you get it wrong. If you decide that you're not going to service your customers because you're trying to preserve capital, you are going to lose the confidence, both short-term and long-term, of your competition. And we don't want that, right? So we've got to protect our territory. We've got to message strategically. We've got to let our customers know that in both message and in actions that we're there for them, that we are, when they're in survival mode, that we are the one group that they don't have to worry about. And that's incredibly difficult when we are also trying to survive at the same time. But this is the messaging that is absolutely crucial when you're going through survival. We also had to take a look at what are the competitive strategies that have been used against us pre-pandemic. The odds are those strategies have been put on hold while the industry is in survival mode. So what are those that are actually working, and can we actually replicate those? What of those might work for us? We've got to make sure that our customers know that we're continuing to innovate, we're continuing to think about them, and we're continuing to make sure that they're serviced correctly. We also decided that this was a perfect time to watch our competition. They're also in the mode to make sure that they don't lose their customers. What are they doing? What are they saying? And what was extraordinary about us was some of the messaging that we were hearing was not exactly what we were seeing. And we came to the conclusion that what they were doing was they were literally trying to buy time and appease their market, their customers, while they tried to figure out what they were doing. You know, and then the concept during survival mode is then how do you sell into that market? Well, you really don't want to. Selling during survival can be awkward at best. It could be seen as opportunistic. It could be seen as a very negative thing. So we didn't want to go out there and actually sell, you know. And finally, the strategy during survival mode, and this is absolutely crucial, is that you need to mind your culture. That thing that got us here, that culture that we think is so important, is the very first thing when you're cutting costs that comes up. You know, is it something that was actually a luxury? And what we found out during this time was that the culture that we've developed this whole time actually became the thing that saved us. The people that were coming to work every day, who were actually putting in 20-hour days, and they were sweating and bleeding for this company to get it back to the point where we can actually get back to to business as usual. We couldn't have bought that. That was a direct result of the culture that we developed over the years. So mind your culture when you're in survival mode. Do not throw it away, and do not think it's not important, and do not think it's a luxury, right? Then the next stage, this happened. Oh, screen share has been stopped. Let me jump back into this. One second. For a technology company, I'm not the most technologically savvy. Can you see that? It's my hope.
Not yet, Kelly.
Not yet. Okay. Well, let me describe it for you then. You know, the thing that, okay, here we go. This is our recovery. All of a sudden, I can't tell you why this happened. There's nothing I can tell you in the market that happened that we would bounce back like this. Maybe the dealerships, you know, figured out how to sell online. Maybe the dealerships figured out to sell out the back door. We know that they're an inventive group of people, you know. But I couldn't tell you why this happened, but thank God it did, because we literally got down to 29% of our pre-pandemic expectations and budget and our forecasts. And we bounced back to about 52% at that point. But what that did, that was like if you saw the old Rocky movie and you saw the you know, all of a sudden a bell rings and goes off and all of a sudden everything changes for him. And that was it for us. This bell ring, which meant that we needed to rapidly go into recovery mode. And remember, our competitors are bankers. Our competitors are in capital preservation mode. They're going to be slower to react. The strategic advantage during this pandemic wasn't necessarily the way that we all circled the wagons. It wasn't necessarily the way we all held on to our money. What's the strategic advantage was how quickly we got into recovery, right? Because what happened is the field of play during this unimaginable, during that crash, just got upended. That field that we took 13 years to so successfully create, is now non-existent. All of the chess pieces are gone. And now a new board is going to be developed after this. And the first person to get into recovery, the first business to get into recovery, is going to be the business that defines that new playing field. You know, my strongest advice during this is that if you can open early, you've got to open early, because you are the one who is going to define how the competitive marketplace works at that point. The other thing you need to do is look at your existing customers now. And during recovery, you need to start over-delivering to those customers, because the other side, your competitors, are going to start waking up pretty soon, and they're going to start marketing to your competitors. Do not give them a reason to live. You know, we've got to start reselling during this period of time, but we got to do it differently. During the recovery, there's still a lot of pain points out there. There's still a lot of people in pain. And think, we're not selling to our people, we're selling to theirs. And when we're selling to theirs, the selling in this case becomes triage, right? The competition is still in capital protection mode, all right? We need to invest in helping their clients with absolutely no strings attached. whether you're allowing them to send us your paperwork or your support, whatever you can do to help your competitors' clients, this is a perfect time to do it with absolutely no strings attached. Be there for them in their time of need, and they will not forget you. You also need to message your competitors' distractions. There's a lot of things that they're saying and a lot of things that they're claiming that are not necessarily true. They're just trying to preserve their client base until that time they can come out of this capital protection mode. An example of this is that we had one competitor in one of our states that messaged to the market that we had furloughed people, and what a horrible thing that was, and how we were not going to be able to serve them because we had furloughed people. Well, the very people that they were messaging to were going through a furlough issue of their own. It was incredibly tone deaf, and it became beneficial. It backfired on them. So you can't ever give the appearance during this recovery phase that you're kicking your competition when they're down. You've got to still be in this sort of we're all in this together mode. But we do have the ability through the recovery to sell, but to sell in a way that is actually in sort of a partnership environment or a triage environment. Your competition is still going to be circling their wagons, but your early entry into the recovery mode is going to expedite their entry into the recovery mode because they're going to have to respond. And when they do that, if they come in a little bit earlier than they have anticipated, there's a very good chance that they're going to screw it up, that they're going to stumble over themselves a little bit. And that is something that you want to be able to try to influence, and that we've tried to influence as we've jumped back into the market. And so you got to keep an eye out for that. And you got to keep an eye out for just exactly what they're doing and how they're responding to your reentry of the market. But it will be expedited on their part. They're not going to be far behind you, but you do want to take that lead. Then, once you're sure that you've recovered, once you're sure that you can actually take a breath, that the revenues are starting to come back in, that you're going to start to be able to invest again, then you go into growth mode. Growth is, in our case, is the going back into the new normal. We don't really know what this new normal is going to look like. We don't really know what the next 6 months are going to look like, much less the next month. But we do know that we're in a position now that we're going to be able to create, we're going to be able to invest now. We're going to be able to invest in new technologies. We're going to be able to invest in the market. In a perfect world, you should be transitioning into this growth mode while your competition is starting to transition out of survival and in the early stages of recovery. And again, I go back to the fact that we are much quicker in the marketplace than the competition. As entrepreneurs, most businesses that are entrepreneurial are much quicker to respond. They're going to take a little bit more time. So this is the time competitively where we need to take advantage of this. We need to invest in implement new technologies that are going to show our market and message to our market that not only are we still here and we're around, but we're a new and better version of this company. We need to take this old plane or this old, the Lincoln town car that we built, 13 years ago and create a Ferrari. And if they see us building that, if they see us working toward that excellence, that we're going to inspire confidence in them, and they're going to be able to rely upon us as they pull out of their survival and recovery mode as well. The more aggressive that you are in these early growth stages, the more aggressive you are, the better you're going to be able to establish your playing field. I hope you understand that. The more aggressive you are, the faster you get into recovery mode, the faster you get into growth mode, the better you're going to be able to solidify your position and cause your larger, bigger, stronger competitors to come over and continue to play on your field. And finally, in this growth mode, the one thing that we're very aware of is that companies that are in the capital preservation mode, these large companies, are never in a position to lead. They react and they follow. The very concept of capital preservation, of managing the margins, requires them to do the least amount to grow, the least amount to maintain their market share. They don't invest very much. If they see that there's a threat, to answer us, they've got to do exactly what we're doing. We rarely see these large companies actually leapfrog us with innovation. And hopefully when they finally catch up to us, if they were able to match what we're doing, we're beyond that and we're doing something new. That's the growth. So let me first say that, you know, this subject is something that could literally take a whole curriculum to discuss. Let me talk about, so look, when I come to this, when I conclude this, you know, we have been managing, you know, the unimaginable, the title of this webinar. It is extraordinarily difficult to think about the things that you did not think would ever happen. But we've been put on notice now. We know that we could lose half our market. We know that the things that can happen outside of our control that can absolutely cause, you know, immense amount of devastation to the company. So now we're in a position as leaders in the company to prepare for that. What was once unimaginable that is now imaginable? And then I'll give you 3 things that we should think about as businesses. The very first thing is that we could shut this, the governors could shut this place down again. I don't think it's going to be as widespread as it was in the beginning, but we have to prepare for this. You know, what was unimaginable, we can now imagine that because it's already happened. The other thing is we have an election coming up in November. It could end up, no matter who wins, it could end up being one of the more violent elections in our history. And, you know, where this affects a business like ours is that half of all of our cars that are sold on a daily basis through our dealerships are sold after 4 o'clock. When we had the marches and the Black Lives Matter protests, there was a curfew that was issued at 6 o'clock. We saw the sales of cars drop through the floor again. So we got to prepare for some social unrest because we know now that that is a possibility. And finally, we also know that there are police officers that are being tried because of the death of George Floyd and others. If they're acquitted, and for those of you who look like me and were around during the Watts riots and then around during the Rodney King riots, we know that the riots didn't happen because of what happened to Rodney King. They happened because the police officers were acquitted. If this happens in this case, then there's a very good chance that those Rodney King riots will look like a party compared to what would happen in this country and possibly all over the world. We've got to prepare for that as well. So these are the things that we've got to think about as we go forward. And I will also say this, that it's almost a little bit too soon to talk about these things because we're in the middle of this. This story is not over. And a month from now, if we had this discussion again, it might be something, you know, considerably different because we're right in the middle of this right now. But for now, that's our story. And with that, I'll throw it back to Gerhard.
Well, thank you very much, Kelly. That was fascinating. We have a number of questions lined up already in the Q&A chat window. I would invite everybody on the webinar to submit your questions there. Before I get to those questions, I would like to ask a personal one from you. Obviously, Vitu has gone through an organizational transformation. Was there a personal transformation as well for you?
Well, I think one of the real issues that came up during this process was how deeply we love and care for the employees in our company. And that there were we had to furlough some employees. We had to really dig deep and really decide if it was our culture, was it real, or was it just something we talked about for a long time? And it was personally, we realized that no, it is real. We know it was real because of the way they responded to us, the way they came back to us. But I think I can speak for Don and Joe and JB and the whole management team to know that we were so personally affected by the fact that this had affected lives, that we have vowed to never let that happen again. And although we can't promise it, I mean, it's certainly something that we didn't anticipate. And I think the biggest personal impact that it had on me was knowing that I am responsible. We are responsible for about 350 families out there. That's about 1,500 mouths we have to feed every single day. And the fact that we weren't able to feed them all during a certain period of time, it weighs very, very heavily on us.
Thank you for your personal response to a personal question. Let me get to the first question in the Q&A window. Mark Napton, he asks a very interesting question. You obviously built a great company culture at Vitu that might also have been disrupted, right? Nobody is at the company headquarters, so you don't have the usual rights of culture. People are afraid maybe of what lies ahead of them. So how will you recapture the culture after the crisis and after the unimaginable has happened?
Yeah, well, the very first thing we did was we decided that we would constantly communicate with folks during furlough and during and the folks that came back to us, and constantly take a measure of what's going on in their lives. It was part of this that I discussed about that you cannot ignore your culture. You can't let it go. You've got to mind your culture. We had people in the company that were a part of our core group that actually put a fund together. And if anybody was hurting out there, they were literally putting their own money into this so that they could help their fellow employees. Then there was the things that we did as a company and as the executives of the company that also tried to make sure that nobody in the company fell through the cracks. That transparency and that continuing care of our employees actually made it, I think, easier. I think when you're in a position where you don't have to prove that you've got such a great culture, it's just sort of part of your day-to-day kind of activity. That's one thing. But when the rubber meets the road, when people are seriously distressed, that's when you take the true measure of who you are as a company, who you are as managers, and what your culture is like. So yes, we do have now, we're going into a situation where we do have remote working. And we're going back and forth with that on now. How do you actually do that, and how do you do it and actually keep people engaged, keep those water cooler discussions going, have people who can talk about their families and their lives with each other, which is all part of this thing we call culture. And we're doing that right now. So I don't know that I have a perfect answer for you on that, but I can tell you that it is top of our minds, and we are making adjustments virtually every day to make sure that we can maintain the culture that we've developed and maybe come out of it a little bit better.
Thank you. I'll jump to Dan Vo's question, which is very legitimate, right? So that startup culture that Vitu obviously still has is very common among early stage startups. But then once they grow, they become more of the bankers that you described, right? How do you maintain this competitive edge at Vitu as you grow through different stages of development?
That is a great question, and it's something we concentrate on and struggle with, since we started actually growing beyond anything Don and I had ever grown before. And this could be the subject of another hour of webinar. But if you look at the different types of markets, all right, if you go back to Rogers' theory of diffusion of innovation, you've got 5 different types of markets, right? You've got early innovators, early adopters, you've got early mass market, late mass market, and laggards. What happens to companies is as they get successful, they get over into that late mass market. And when they're over there, the demands of those customers are much less. There's not a lot of R&D. You're not trying to build the shiny new toy that you've been building for the early adapters and early innovators. So it really is sort of a nirvana for most companies. And what ends up happening is that's when I think you see that transition from startup into the banker mentality, because you're able to maximize your market share, you're able to maximize your EBITDA, and you're by losing the innovation and losing that sort of startup mentality. It's very expensive to be in startup mode. Right? So it's an attractive nuisance that you get over there where you've got all of these benefits of being the big guys in the largest market share, and you don't really have to pay for innovation. And I think that's the beginning of the end. And we keep an eye on that. We are at 72% of the market here in California, 100% in Oregon. That magnetic pull to become more banker-like is extreme. And we also recognize that every one of our competitors started up the way we started up. They started up as 1 or 2 people like Don and I did behind a broken old desk trying to figure out how to make this, if this is something you could really make money on. And then somewhere along the line that shifted. And we are aware of that. And we do believe that there is that point where when, I said earlier, we work for the applause. And, the longer sustain the applause, the more the money rolls in. The other guys work for the money. As soon as we make that transition, we become the bankers. We're trying to avoid that. I don't know if we can avoid it forever, but we're trying to avoid that.
We have a question from Saba, she's actually calling in from thousands of miles away. Her first question is about reframing and bigger framing attitudes that she sees as the key to innovation. So do you agree with that it's mostly about reframing, that you maintain innovation and that you manage through crises like the current ones?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the companies that are going to be successful as they go out are not going to be the same companies that got into this pandemic. You've got to innovate, you've got to restructure, and you've got to reframe, or you are going to fall into that last category of these stages of disruption. You're going to become rather insignificant while somebody else is out there doing it for you. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay, let me just see. We have more. Michael, I'm applauding you, Kelly. His family has 3 generations in the car business. What do you see as the future of the dealerships as they stand now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We are seeing the normal stuff, consolidation of family operated business into these larger corporations, larger companies. But I think what's going to happen post pandemic is we're seeing a big move into internet sales. We're seeing a big move where geography isn't going to be as important to the buyer of that vehicle. In fact, right now, because the manufacturers stopped manufacturing vehicles, it's very, very difficult to get a good car. There's a lot of cars that are available, but not the ones that people want. And to find that car, you may have to go to New Mexico or Texas or New Jersey, and they're going to have to ship it out here. I think what we're going to see is a transition to more and more internet sales. I think you're going to see that the dealerships that actually make that transition are going to be highly successful. At least they'll survive. And I think those that don't make that transition, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to continue.
Would that include more direct to consumer sales by manufacturers?
I don't think, well, first of all, that's not legal. I think Tesla is the only company that's allowed to do that. Part of the reason that we have franchises, dealership franchises, is because it is currently in every state illegal for manufacturers to actually sell direct to the consumers. And there's constantly lawsuits that are going on with that. So from a dealership point of view, I hope that continues. And I have no doubt that it will, at least into the near future.
And will the shift to more internet-based sales affect your business?
No, we have a division that we call it our interstate division, where we'll title a car in any state in the country. I think it will affect our business, but I think it'll affect it in a good way. We'll be able to capture more cars and more sales throughout the country than just the states that we're in.
Question from Ross Young. How do you push important responsibility to your employees?
Well, the first thing is you got to provide good training. You've got to provide, mentorship programs within the company. You've got to make sure that they're prepared for the really important task that you're putting forward to them. And the key to this, and again, this goes to the culture, is you've got to trust them. You've got to trust them. When Don and I started this business, and then we had our first 5 employees or 10 employees, we were taking out the trash and we were licking the envelopes and we were doing whatever it took to make this company a success and make it survive for just even another day. Now with 300 employees, we have become literally the most unimportant people in the company. If a lightning bolt hit me tonight, that company opens up tomorrow. It's still going to be a great company. So the recognition, I think, that the people that you've trained over the years and the people that you've mentored up really do know what they're doing, and they should be trusted doing what they're doing. And you shouldn't manage them down. Maybe going off on a tangent here, but our strategy for quote managing is not to push people down and march them in a direction. It's to lift them up and allow them to achieve their full potential. And if they do that, some incredible things will come out for you. And it also makes the most valuable person in the company isn't the person that is the best person. It's the person that can actually inspire the most people in the company to rise up. And then bring it back to the answer to your question is you got to trust your people. And if you don't trust them, man, you've done something wrong along the way.
So how do you find all those great people?
Well, they're in our company. Everybody's got a value and everybody's got a talent, and every single person you hire, you've got to recognize that you hired them for a reason. You hired them because they're important and they're intelligent and they're innovative and they get a job done every single solitary day, and you give them opportunity. And when you give them that opportunity, the real intelligence comes out. And it could be intelligence in the amount of work that they put in, that they're incredibly hard workers. It could be intelligence in the amount of creativity they bring up. But every single person in your company has that ability. It's up to you as a manager. It's up to you as a company to create an environment where those people can rise up. And if you do, the problem is not finding them. The problem is, which one do you pick?
Mm-hmm. So how do you pick?
I'll let Don do that.
Uh, so we have another great question, which I guess is about core competences, right? So, and the question is about as you're approaching saturation in certain markets, how do you are there other types of businesses which your service or product might appeal to, and how do you apply your skill set, your core competences to new industries?
Yeah, well, we have this this philosophy. Ted Turner had this great quote some years ago that I heard on an interview where somebody asked me, he's got millions of acres throughout like Wyoming and Montana, and somebody asked him, "Were you trying to buy all the product or are you trying to buy all the property in the country?" And he goes, "No, just the property next to ours." And I thought, what a wonderful business concept that is. So as we've grown this company, we've literally tried to find out what is the property next to ours, what is the thing we touch that we can now move into. You know, in our world, when we register cars, if you think about it, what exactly we're doing, we're enabling a compliance sort of communication with government. And if you step back from that a little bit and say, well, where are the other compliance opportunities there? Well, these vehicles have computers on board. These vehicles literally have voices. They know when they're not going to pass their smog inspection. They know when through their GPS, they know when they've gone by a toll booth. They know if they parked in a smart parking spot. They know if, in the case of California, we're going through a pilot project where you're going to pay taxes not on not when you're buying gas, because we have a lot of electric cars, but where you drive. The car knows if it's driven when it went over the border to go to Las Vegas, then when it came back, the car can give you that tax form at the end of the year. There are so many opportunities in the life cycle of this vehicle, from the birth of that vehicle to every single time it gets renewed and smogged and the tolls, that to the very end of its life when it becomes shredded. That world, we couldn't take advantage of that world in my lifetime in this business. So it's going to be, there's a lot left. We also realize one of the things that happened is when we showed that we are one of those companies who do believe in the mission and not just the bottom line, opportunities came up with us. One of the opportunities that came up was to start a payment processing company because there was a need. And currently we have about 3,000 of these payment processing machines in all of the DMV windows in the state of California. And I think that's a business that's going to expand pretty dramatically as well. So keep an eye out for the property next to yours. And that's my advice.
Wonderful. We're at the end of our webinar. Unfortunately, it's 12:45. So Kelly, thank you so much for giving us your time today. Good luck with the rest of the transformation. I would also like to invite everybody to join us again for the next webinar that is coming up on September 2nd at the usual time at 12 o'clock Pacific time. The topic of the next one is going to be global supply chain risk management during uncertain times, strategies and techniques for managing the new normal. And it's by Sumatra Sengupta, who is now a managing director with a private equity firm and used to be director of our MBA and EMBA programs at Cal Lutheran. Again, thank you everybody for joining us today. And Kelly, special thanks to you and good luck.
Well, thank you, Gerhard.
We thank you for participating in today's Forward Together webinar series, brought to you by the School of Management at California Lutheran University. The School of Management offers a broad range of programs and community services. Whether you're looking to upgrade your career, locate current economic data from our Center for Economic Research and Forecasting, or a place to start and grow your business at Hub 101, our community startup space, we invite you to visit us at clu.edu/SOM and join the community as we move forward together.